So we have this amazing guest. He's a very dear friend of mine, an incredible man. Some people call him Chaitanya Charan, but some of you might, it's a tongue twister, for many of us. So, his name is CC, Chaitanya Charan. You can just call him Chaitanya or CC
Charan
or Charan, whatever floats your boat. He is an incredible man because he has dedicated his life to studying the yoga text. The Vedas are extremely vast, and he just made a commitment to study in depth. So he's been spending his life studying the Vedas and practicing the Vedas, and then imbibing the mood of the Vedas. And after that, he has to, because part of the yoga practice system is that you must share the knowledge that you get. It's very vital. In order to have its full effect, you have to share it with someone else. Otherwise, it's no fun. And so he's written volumes of books. He currently has a podcast called the Monk's Podcast, and he gives Bhagavad Gita daily classes, I think, his classes. And he's got about 700,000 people following him on that. And he happens to be visiting Atlanta, so I said, why not put him on the hot seat? I mean, it's not really hot. It's pretty nice temperature. There's people here with no judgments. So I wanted him to share his beautiful deep intake as we study the 9 islands of the heart, starting with Sravanam. And one day we'll also study the stem of this beautiful lotus flower. Everybody remembers this is what your heart looks like. So I'll now hand it over to Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and then whenever you have questions, you can just write the questions, and I will also keep asking him questions on your behalf. So, let us begin with words of wisdom from this amazing lifelong monk, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. So if you don't mind to first tell us, what is your understanding of the heart space? And how is it applicable for us living in a day-to-day life to try and find that space and live from that space?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you, Vedaji, for inviting me. And whatever he speaks about me is the potential that he sees in me, which will hopefully manifest in the future. Right now, I am simply a struggling student of the yoga's texts, trying to apply them and trying to share them to my capacity. And I'm amazed and inspired to see the many ways in which my dear friend here, Prabhu, is actually sharing this yoga wisdom. He's here in Atlanta and all over the world. I travel all over the world, but I don't think I am as effective as he is without traveling even 1/10 of what I do. So I'm happy to be here. And
you can tell that he has sincere humility in his heart.
Yeah.
Please carry on.
Thank you. So I love the word heart space. My understanding of it would be 2 things. Firstly, when we use the word heart itself, there is an ambiguity to it. There is the biological organ, the heart, which is at a particular space within our body. But most of the times when we use the word heart, we don't use it for the biological organ. And say, you broke my heart. That doesn't mean the X-ray will show the fragments of the biological organ heart. We refer to the heart metaphorically as the seat of emotions. And not just emotions, but we can also say values, values that center on our emotions, the thing that we value the most. So the heart, when we refer to, is the seat of our emotions, and especially our values combined with our emotions. So the thing that we deep care for the most, along with the other things that we care for, those comprise our heart. And to be, in my understanding, to be situated in our heart space means to be aware of and to be aligned with the things that we value the most, the things that we feel most strongly about. And unfortunately, most of the world, and you could say most of our mind, the world externally and our mind internally, tend to dislodge us from our heart space, even alienate us from there, because there are so many other things which pop up in front of us, and they all seem more urgent and sometimes even more important. And thus we can spend days, hours, days, weeks, months, and years never really doing the things that matter for us. So it's when we get into our heart space, that's the time when we are aware of what really matters to us, and then we can align our time, our energy, and our life with the things that really matter. That's my understanding. What is your understanding when you started this feature and use the word heart space?
So, as you know, when this heart space we began, I think about a week, 2 weeks ago. Many of you know my work, my seva in the world, is to disseminate the heart that I was able to capture of my teachers. I am simply the Vai media, I feel, simply a little parrot repeating what my teachers who have dedicated their lives to serving and nurturing the beautiful divine love that is existent, and most of you know this word bhakti, in the heart. So for me, the heart space is a word that Keshavi Devi really liked it. So she said, we have to call our sangha, global sangha, as the heart space, because we are not trying to connect with each other on an intellectual level or on an emotional level, but really from the level of the heart, from the level of bhakti, from the space of purity, from the space of sanctity, pristine, a space where there is no room for judgment, there is no space for anything other than pure transcendental love. So for me, this is where I, really attach myself to this mission of helping people to understand this sacred space within themselves. And that is where bhakti happens. Bhakti is love, spiritual love. So Chaitanya Charan Prabhu has been practicing yoga for many, many years. So what has been some transformation that you have experienced in, or what are some meditations that you have practiced to cultivate and nurture that heart, and how have you been able to share that heart with others, and why do you do it?
Okay. Thank you. Just before that, I would like to reflect on what you said. So in one sense, the sangha heart space is where we can share our heart and where we can realize what is of value to our heart. So this social heart space can help us all become situated more in our inner heart space. That way you can connect the two meanings.
Correct.
Yeah. So for me, when I was growing up, I grew up in India, and I had a lot of faith in the power of education. That if everybody could be more educated, then there many more doors would open for them, and they could have a better life, and they could all help create a better world. And to that extent, with that understanding, I dedicated myself to studying. When I was in college itself, I started conducting tuitions, free tuitions for children from underprivileged backgrounds. And in that way, I was focused on education. But then I noticed something disturbing, even distressing. I was at one of the top universities in India, but I noticed that educational brilliance did not correlate with a good character or good values. I could see students who were far more brilliant than me, but many of them were quite short sighted, self centered, and really not thinking much about anything beyond their own pleasures. Now, we could say that in the youth, that's how many people are. But I had thought that those who would be educated, those who would be in what we could call it, what I thought of as temples of learning, would have higher values. I could even see that there was one student whom I looked up to because he had been the first in the university for all his 8 semesters. I was studying engineering, electronics engineering, and he was brilliant at electronics, and yet he was a chain smoker. Now, it just didn't click for me. If he can figure out such complex electronics problems so easily, why can't he figure out that he's killing himself by smoking like this? So he told me that actually smoking helps me to think sharply. I thought, the sharpness is cutting you. What is the use of sharp thinking? It is hurting you. And then at that time, he got the highest paid job in the history of our college. He was considered to be like the iconic success story. But within the first 6 months of his working at that job, he was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. And within a year of working at that job, he died. So that shook me up. And also, as I said, I was trying to do free tuitions in various subjects, English, math, history, to underprivileged kids. And when I started talking with those kids, I started feeling that they started becoming friends and they started telling about their home situations. And most of their parents were, not parents, mostly fathers, were alcoholics and was domestic violence. And I had the stereotype that somebody who's an alcoholic is a person who is irresponsible and reckless, and somebody who's drunk and lying on the street. But when I talked with those fathers, they were very appreciative that I was coming and teaching their children. And they said that we hope the best for our children. Then those kids told me that once they get a bottle in their hands, they become like a different person. So I started thinking at that time that, am I really...
When he says bottle in your hands, meaning drinking alcohol.
Severely drunk. Okay. Bottle in the hand. Okay.
So,
maybe there's some of my Indian usages you can...
No. It's really funny because that expression, when I was growing up in the monastery, a common theme was if someone carried a bottle, even if it was a 7-Up bottle, we immediately thought this person is a very sinful person because he's drinking alcohol, because we didn't know any better. So that expression is commonly used in India, a bottle in hand, which automatically means you're an alcoholic. So just clarifying that for some of you.
Thank you. So then we, as a part of that organization on behalf of which I was doing these tuition classes, we decided to get into some kind of work to help people become free from alcohol. So we invited some anti-alcohol campaigners to give talks. I also learned some of those things. And we started sharing. And many of the parents, the fathers especially, they started becoming free from it. In fact, one of us, a small village near our college, an entire village, we use the word in India, became dry, became sober. And we consider that a great success of our social outreach. But unfortunately, a few months later, there was a local municipality election. And one of the politicians, in order to woo the voters, brought 2 truckloads of free alcohol for everyone. And not only the fathers, but even their kids got all drunk. And that was the time both I and some of my friends who were working together, we were quite disappointed. But that's when I started thinking that It's not just that education opens doors for people, but there is something inside us which stops us from walking through those doors. And I could see that this self-destructive instinct that was there in somebody who was super educated and super brilliant, like the student, the topper. We used in India the word topper, the number one student whom I mentioned earlier. And it was there in people who were relatively uneducated. They were living in underprivileged backgrounds. So that's the time when I started searching, what is the self-destructive thing inside us? And I could also notice that it was there with me to some extent. I was infamous at that time for being short-tempered. And I could see that I was getting myself into unnecessary trouble. So that's when my reading started becoming a little more philosophical, and I came across the Bhagavad Gita. So initially I was a little skeptical, is this book relevant to me? But when I read 336 in the Bhagavad Gita, Athakena prayuktoyam papam charati purusha nichanapi varshneya baladivani yojita. So Arjuna is asking Krishna, by what is one impelled to self-destructive acts? Even if one doesn't want to, as if by force. I felt this was the exact question whose answer I was looking for. It took me some time to understand what the Bhagavad Gita's answer was and how that answer was relevant. But once I understood it, then I started applying the principles of the Bhagavad Gita, especially understanding its wisdom, understanding life's spiritual values and purposes, and doing sonic meditation, mantra meditation, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And I found that my anger issues subsided substantially. One of my close friends he was in his college. In fact, he was very close to me, but he was gliding towards alcoholism. He also adopted the principles of the Bhagavad Gita and he just gave it up completely. So that's the time I felt that this was the education that was lacking in society. That yes, education can open new doors. Education can create the pathway to a better life. But this was the education that was lacking. That, we have much modern education and it's important in its own place. But that education can help us make the outer world better. It can help us create faster planes, better phones, better devices. But better devices are good enough. But what about the vices inside? So there are devices and there are vices. And if there are vices inside, the better the devices, the worse the vices become. Somebody who is distractible, they get devices, they'll get a million times more distracted. So I am sometimes known as the spiritual scientist. I love science and I love spirituality now. So I see that science can make things better in the outer world. Science can make the outer world better through improving devices. But spirituality can make the inner world better by reducing vices. And that's how science and spirituality both are needed for us to make a holistic difference in the world. So I was from a scientific background, but I felt that there are so many people who are studying science and there are so few people who are studying and sharing spirituality, especially spirituality presented from a rational, logical, scientific perspective. That's what I try to do.
I had mentioned to him about this 9 islands of the heart, and we are covering only the first island, and we haven't discovered the whole paradise of beautiful islands that we have the great opportunity to fully explore, and we haven't fully explored. So I was going to have him share more with us about, we discussed what hearing and listening and Sravanam, the word Sravanam in Sanskrit, what it means. So I wanted to have him share with us in depth a little bit more about this Sravanam. How is it directly connected to the heart?
Thank you.
Chaitanya Charan.
I try to gravitate, whatever subject I study, I try to gravitate to the Bhagavad Gita. There's one of the lesser known verses in the Gita which talk about this principle of Sravanam is 13:26. In the 13th chapter, Krishna talks about various ways one can raise one's consciousness toward the spiritual level. And in 13:25, he gives 3 paths. He talks about Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Dhyan Yoga. And in 13:26, the next verse after that, he says, Anye to eva majananta shutva annebhyo pasate tepi chati tarantyeva mrityum shruti parayanaha. So he says that there are people apart from these three, those who follow karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga. There are these people. Anye to eva majanantaha. They may not know much about spirituality. They may not know much about various technicalities of various paths. But shutva annebhya. They just hear from those who are wise. Shutva annebhya. And then upasate. They become attracted to a higher reality. When they hear, then what happens? Te pichati tarantyeva. They will also go beyond. Mutyum. They will go beyond the cycle of birth and death. They will go beyond mortality. They will go beyond the misery that characterizes this world. And then Krishna uses the word. When will they do that? Shruti parayanaha. So parayana is devoted, dedicated. Shruti is to hearing. In the bhakti tradition, often the word Narayana Parayana or Vasudeva Parayana is used. Those who are devoted to Narayana and Vasudeva, the names of the ultimate reality. But here it is said, those who are dedicated to hearing. Sometimes it's translated as those who are devotees of hearing. Shruti Parayanaha. So why is it so significant, this hearing, that it's sometimes difficult to even conceive of some higher reality, ultimate reality that we cannot perceive with our senses. And to become devoted to that may seem quite difficult. However, a easier, more accessible step to that is to become devoted to the process that will take us there. And that is Shruti, Sravanam, Shruti Parayanaha. So now, to put it succinctly, that we can say our eyes take us toward illusion and our ears take us beyond illusion toward reality. So this is what happens in the Bhagavad Gita at the start also, when Arjuna comes in the middle of the battlefield and he sees the two armies. In fact, I've written several articles on this topic. In the first chapter, from 121 to around 126, when Arjuna is getting confused, several times he uses the word Aikshita, I want to see. I see this, I want to see this. Now, seeing is important, no doubt. But our eyes can very easily drag us into illusion, because the world is filled with captivating objects which can allure us and deter us from exploring anything deeper. On the other hand, what happens to Arjuna is that he hears the Gita, and by hearing the Gita, his illusion gets dissipated. At the end, he says, Nashto moha smritir labdha. And how did it happen? Tat prasadan. He hears from Arjuna. In fact, the last question that Krishna asked to Arjuna, or you can say, the only question that Krishna asks Arjuna in the Gita. There are 17 questions that Arjuna asks Krishna, but the only question that Krishna asks Arjuna is, Kachid etat shrutam partha tvayekagrena chetasa. Were you able to hear attentively? And the logical corollary of that question is, was your illusion dispelled? So the idea is that through hearing, Arjuna's illusion gets dispelled. So the eyes are often the pathway to illusion, and the ears are the pathway to the reality beyond illusion. So that's why hearing is so important. Now, of course, the eyes can also be the pathway to reality when we come in spiritual places and we associate spiritual people and we see spiritual imagery. That's also possible. And the ears can also take us into illusion if we hear just mundane or sensuous or spiritually irrelevant or distracting stuff. But broadly speaking, in the bhakti tradition and the broad yoga tradition, it is a shruta ikshita pathaha, that it is the ears that inform our vision. That it's not that we reject our eyes as source of illusion, but rather when our ears, when what we hear, they inform our vision, then shruta ikshita patha, then the path to the ultimate reality opens for us. The eyes guided by the ears will show us the path to the ultimate reality. That's why hearing is so important, to align ourselves with the things that really matter for us. Because the eyes will often captivate us with things that are superficial, things that are titillating, things that are giving some instant pleasure, some dopamine hit. But afterwards, they just become insubstantial. But hearing reminds us of the things of enduring value and inspires us to realign our life with those enduring values.
It reminded me of something very interesting that I was told by my teacher in the monastery. He explained Sravanam. He said, you must do Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. You must serve the Bhagavata, the transcendental essence of spiritual knowledge and vibration. And that you should do with your ears. So, and I said, okay, I get it. He says, no, you have to eat with your ears. And I said, Shravanam doesn't mean that. He said, no, Shravanam means you eat with your ears. That means when you eat something, you should be able to extract and digest what you eat. And then whatever it is that you ate with your ears, you should apply it and use that energy and resources to apply it into your day-to-day life. So Sravanam, what he explained to me was not just hearing, but listening deep within from your heart and making sure that everything that you hear, you actually try and practically apply it. And through the process of application, you will then be able to have realizations, which will then be part of your experience of the divinity within this world and within ourselves, and thereby they become assets that carry us through very difficult parts and aspects of our lives. So it's interesting that the emphasis is so much on really listening from our heart. So Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, if you could explain a little bit more.
If you can elaborate on this point, what you mentioned just now.
I will have you elaborate.
Yeah,
I'll have Chaitanya Charan Prabhu elaborate this one.
It's a very beautiful point that it's said that hearing can be at 3 levels. One is hearing simply at the level of the ears. We hear it and we don't pay much attention to it. Just some information comes in, the perception goes in, and it doesn't even stay for very long. It's like we hear something, and even before that hearing is over, we have forgotten most of it. Now that can happen to all of us because we have finite brain capacities, but at least we try to engage ourselves intellectually. So hearing it is only at the level of the senses. That is, you could say, the least effective hearing. That is also beneficial, especially because if we are hearing spiritual sounds, then just that contact with the sound is itself edifying. It is sanctifying. But it is of extremely limited value. It's like somebody gets $1 million and a child gets $1 million. And a child thinks, oh, if I can just get a chocolate with it, I'll be happy. So you have $1 million, you could get 1 million chocolates with them or more. But the child is just using $1 million for getting one chocolate. So that's like underusing hearing if we just treat it at the level of information. And that's one of the biggest obstacles. Sometimes when we hear, we often start thinking, I know this. And then we don't explore it any further. I know this, so we turn off mentally. Then that is not very helpful. So then the next level is hearing, where it goes from the ears to the head. That is where it becomes comprehension. Okay. There is the point and there is the point of the point. I know this point. Okay, that's okay. But why is this point being spoken? In this particular context, what is the thought flow? What is this example for? What is the point of this point? When we start doing that, then we start gaining comprehension. That's why there is engagement of the head required, and that's considered a deeper level of hearing. Not just the senses, but you could say the sense, the sense-bearing faculty, that is the intelligence, the head. Now, beyond that, so the second level, Third level is from the head, it enters into the heart. That happens when we don't just think don't just ask, how does this make sense? What is the point of this point? But rather, how does this point apply to me? How does this relate with me and my values? When we make that relevant, how can I use this to change my life, to change myself? So that is where the service attitude comes in. So we are hearing not just to gain some information, not just to gain some comprehension. Both of these could be done in the mood of mastery. Now, I will tell the whole world how much I know. I will tell the whole world how clever I am. Now, what does that say? Some people say, my humility is my greatest quality. So, this is inherent contradiction. So, if somebody is humble, they won't think that they have great qualities. So, unfortunately, what happens is that at the level of the ears or at the level of the head, we may use this knowledge to simply boost our ego. Even spiritual knowledge can be used for a non-spiritual purpose. But when we let the knowledge enter the heart, or when does the doorway to the heart open? When we approach it with sevaya. Veda Prabhu quoted the verse, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Sevaya means service. With a service attitude. This knowledge, this wisdom is actually a manifestation of the divine. And the divine is not to be mastered, not to be conquered, is not to be made a servant of my ego. Rather, the divine is to be served. So how can I apply this knowledge? How can I internalize this knowledge? So how can I serve this knowledge? What does serve this knowledge means? Mold my life according to this knowledge. So when we have that attitude, that's when it enters into the heart. That's when we are actually opening ourselves for this knowledge to transform us. Otherwise, we are simply thinking of using the knowledge to do what we want to do. That is also good. We'll be doing whatever we are doing in a more informed, maybe a wiser way. But we could say that we have gurus, and the purpose of the guru is not just to sanction our way. It is to show us the way. It is not just to sanction our way. Oh yeah, what you're doing is good. Yeah, it's good. But there's so much more you can do in life to show us the way. So that is possible when the knowledge enters the heart. So hearing at the level of the ears just gives us some information. Hearing at the level of the head gives us comprehension. But hearing at the level of the heart brings about transformation. It changes us. It aligns our values with that which is of eternal value, that which is of supreme value. And that's the transformation that can bring the greatest value to our life.
Beautiful. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. And another thing that I was thinking as you were speaking is how listening from the heart actually helps to build character. And society today, as you may observe, and especially someone like Dhyana Devi, who's working in the field, interacting with a lot of dented cans, as we say it, as an expression, you can see that there's a vacancy. It's void. Some people, because this character is missing in their lives. So through hearing, through listening from the heart, we are actually truly able to connect with other hearts. And that's what Dhyana Devi was writing to me about earlier in her work. It's so important that when we communicate with the world, we communicate with the heart, and we speak from the heart, with the heart, and to the heart. And this is why bhakti should be the center of our lives. When we do our morning sadhana, it is extremely vital for us to spend that quality time with our heart space. It's just you and this transcendental heart space meditation mantra, just bonding and connecting and just having that deepest relationship. Because when we do the heart space mantra, where we intentionally take our awareness to every single syllable that comes out of our mouth and be in that space in company and association with that powerful sound vibration, then what happens, the antennas become more in tuned with the spiritual energies of the world, the spiritual vibrations of the world, and all the incredible communications and informations that we can gather from our interactions with others and with various aspects of life. So we have 10 minutes. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you. For those of you who have on video, would you like to share? As we know, it is extremely vital that this doesn't become something that you listen and it's just sticks with the senses, but it actually goes to your mind and your heart. So if you don't mind to share, for those of you who would be happy to share, about what is your reflection on this beautiful discussion from Chaitanya Charan Prabhu?
I still have a lot of guilt, and I have the feeling I lost so many time in things that not so good, not transcendental and spiritual so good, and I have a lot of guilt and sorrow, and I'm crying all the time the last time, and I don't know what to do with it. Very guilty for the things I've done, and it's so many time I lost to do things that not so good. They're not so good for the spiritual way and for my body, and I don't know how to handle it at the moment. It's very hard, so I'm trying to do the mantra, the krita. I meditate now, but I'm scared that I'm going to lose it again. So, yeah, that's what I want to share.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it's okay to feel guilty.
Mm.
It's human.
Mm.
And it's completely normal.
Okay.
Now, just making sure that you're in the right association.
Mm.
You have people like Kamala, who is there in Belgium. She is a heart specialist.
Okay.
And she knows how to repair hearts. That's sweet. So I would say that it's such a beautiful question. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, please, would you like to share something? And we have 5 minutes.
Sure. I'm sorry you're going through such distress. And I'll say that two things I'll say that. First is that we can look at our life from our perspective and from a divine perspective. So we use the word Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness can mean two things. To become conscious of how we are acting in relationship with Krishna.
1 minute.
To be conscious of how we are acting in relationship with Krishna. And it also means to be conscious of how Krishna is acting in relationship with us. So from the first perspective, yes, each one of us can think of things we have done that we are not proud of. Some of those may be worse than others. And from that perspective, to feel regret is a part of Krishna consciousness. To feel guilt is, yeah, I could have made better choices and I didn't. But at the same time, Krishna consciousness is not limited only to what we did or we didn't do. Krishna consciousness also means to know that Krishna has always been acting in our life. And no matter what turns we may take in our life, Krishna has a plan to take us to a better place. The very fact that you could go to other Desh and you got this experience, as you said, you lost your heart here. that means you are still in Krishna's loving hands. And it is Krishna who enabled you to have this experience. And that is what will help us to move forward. So it is that Krishna is like the ultimate GPS. When we are going on the road, no, the GPS shows us the best way to move forward. But the GPS says turn right, and say we turn left. What does the GPS do at that time? GPS doesn't say, you didn't obey me, get lost. No, the GPS immediately reroutes and says, okay, from here, you go ahead and turn right and you will be back on the track. So Krishna is like that ultimate GPS. Even if we have taken wrong turns, still Krishna is always there to reroute us and to take us closer to him. So in one sense, we could say that because of my past choices, I lost so much time. And that's one way which is favorable to our feeling Krishna conscious. But another way to understand is that even if we have made some mistakes, Krishna is so expert that his plan can work even through our mistakes. And he can draw us closer to him even through whatever bad choices we have made. Our mistakes are not Krishna's plan, but Krishna's plan can work even through our mistakes. That is Krishna's expertise. So that's one thing to give us hope and not let us feel negative about it. Another point I would like to say is that guilt is good in the sense that guilt is like a psychological defense mechanism from unhealthy choices. Just like if we go close to fire, we feel heat and our hand recoils from it. So that's a physical defense mechanism that is innate to us. So similarly, guilt is a psychological defense mechanism that deters us from unhealthy choices. However, guilt can sometimes misfire. That means guilt and pseudo-guilt can look very similar. So I'll explain what I mean by this. Say if I am here and the right thing that I'm supposed to do is here and something wrong which I should not do is here. That's my little finger. So the middle finger is I, the little finger is the thing I don't want to do. The thumb is the thing which I should be doing. So guilt should be like our ring finger, which comes in between us and the wrong thing that we should not do. But sometimes the mind is so sneaky, like I earlier said, the mind can use our humility to make us proud. So the mind can also use our guilt to not stop us from doing the wrong thing, but to stop us from doing the right thing. That means the guilt can come not in the place of our ring finger, but in the place of a point finger. Oh, I wasted so much time. So what is the use? I made so many mistakes. What is the hope for me? So if guilt is coming between us and the right thing, then we have to understand that is guilt being hijacked, guilt being misused. It is pseudo guilt. So if that is coming, then put it aside. Yes, and focus on the fact that yes, I made mistakes. Maybe they're terrible mistakes, but Krishna has not rejected me. And the opportunity for me to reconnect with him is still there. So let me focus on that. And that way we can keep moving forward. So if guilt stops us from doing the unhealthy thing, that's good. If guilt stops us or discourages from doing the right thing, then see that also as a illusion, as guilt being misused, exploited, and keep it away, keep a distance from it, knowing that Krishna still has a plan for us.